in a little bit of your bio. Where'd you grow up, and what led you to become the president of a seminary? That's not something that necessarily some people go, you know, when I want to grow up, I want to be a president of a seminary. What happened there?
Well, no, I didn't want to be president of the seminary. Never thought that's what I would be, or even thought about trying to be. I was and am still a scholar. But you know, in the seminary environment, we also need leaders of individual campuses to sort of set the vision and direction. And sometimes you step up when asked. So that was about what happened to me. You know, now 10 years ago, I've been in the role as president. I've been here 22 years as a professor, but 10 years as president. And yeah, they asked me and I said no, and they asked me again and I said no. And then finally, you know how these things go, I was persuaded to take it on. And so I saw it as a labor of service, actually, because I knew it would cost me a lot more time away from my writing. But, you know, I was happy to serve and still happy to serve here in that capacity.
I'm always interested in how people get into serving at the presidential role. And I know some people are like, well, oftentimes it happened upon them rather than them seeking anything out. They were approached in the
That's
same
true.
way, so.
You might argue that's what you would want, hopefully, in a leader, is not someone who's pining away to be the head person necessarily, but finds themselves called to it through a number of circumstances. And even reluctantly, it's not a bad thing necessarily, depending on you know, once they get in it, they've got to embrace it. But you know, for me, I'm 100% convinced it was the right move, but it wasn't a move that was intuitive to me at the time.
But being in the 10 years, you've written a lot, and you said it's early Christianity is what your area of expertise is, and yet you've written a book called The Bully Pulpit, as we're talking about spiritual abuse in a contemporary situation. So let's talk a bit about this book, Confronting the Problem of Spiritual Abuse in the Church, because this is a problem. I mean, let's just start from the very beginning. What's the definition of spiritual abuse? Let's start there and then we'll move out.
Yeah, well, as you probably know and could guess, I spent a good bit of time on that in the book because I know the terminology is debated. People have opinions about it. Some people like the term, some people don't. And I talk about the strengths and weakness of it in the book. But fundamentally argue that even though the term is relatively new, and even though the term itself as a phrase isn't found in the Bible, the concept is there. And I labor hard to show that the concept is there. And I think that's the main thing. And so the concept, the idea behind spiritual abuse is when a leader who has spiritual authority wields that authority in such a way that he operates in a domineering, authoritarian, and heavy-handed way to those under his care. And this is the heartbeat of what spiritual abuse is. It's misusing your authority to hurt somebody. So the term abuse confuses people because it's not physical abuse, right? You're not hitting someone. It's not sexual abuse. There's no sexual dimensions to this kind of abuse, but it's the kind of thing where you can really squash people in your ministry by wielding your authority in this way. And I track that throughout the Bible and even into the modern day.
One of the things that I found that was very interesting in the book is that you actually, yes, you tracked it through the Bible, but you also showed that this isn't a new phenomenon. I mean, you showed certain historical figures referring to the subject of spiritual abuse that I was unfamiliar with. Tell us a little bit about that, because this is not a new phenomenon. For those that people think, oh, this is a new thing, it's not. It's been around since the beginning.
People ask me all the time, and I've had a chance to do quite a few podcasts on the book. One of the most common questions I get is the problem new? Or a corollary question is the problem worse than it used to be? And we don't know if it's worse or not. There's no hard data on it, but it's certainly not new. It's been around since the dawn of time. As soon as one human being has authority over another human being, they can wield that authority in very fallen, sinful ways. And so you're gonna get that from Genesis all the way to the end. But then other church leaders have recognized it. I talk about, for example, James Bannerman's classic book from the 1800s on the church, and it's conceived of as this sort of conservative, faithful, standard work about ecclesiology. And people think, well, you know, he didn't ever think about this. Well, he did. In fact, he had a term for it called spiritual tyranny, which I thought was actually a pretty good term. We use the term spiritual abuse, but pick your phrase. And again, at the end of the day, I don't really care what we call it. I stick with spiritual abuse because it's well established as a phrase now, and people can wrap their head around it. But we could call it other things, and other terms have been used.